bit overheated. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Sorry. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Pad Paramahansa, Bhagavad Acharya Ashtotar the Sri Srimad, Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki Jai. ISKCON BBT founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa, Bhagavad Acharya Ashtotar the Sri Srimad, Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavindra ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki Jai, Samaveda Bhaktivinoda ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. So give me a second here. Thank you. Now, does anyone remember exactly where we are? I know we're in the 5th chapter.
5.8.
Text what?
8.
8. Okay, thank you. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 18th day of July 2022 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 5 entitled Karma Yoga, Action in Krishna Consciousness, text number 8 and 9 on page 236. I hope this is, yeah, that's, everyone's on 236. Naiva kinchit karomiti yukto manyeta tattvavit pashyan shrinvan sprishan jigran ashnan gachan swapan shvasan pralapan visrajan grinnan unmisham nimishan api indriyan indriyarteshu vartanta itidariyan. Okay. Naiva kinchit karomiti yukto manyeta tattvavit pashyan shrinvan sprishan jigran ashnan gachan sopan shvasan palapan visrajan grinnan unmishan nimishan api indriyan indriyarteshu vartanta iti dariyan naiva kinchit karomiti yukto manyeta tattvavit pashyan shrinvan sprishan jigran ashnan gachan swapan shvasan pralapan visrajan grinnan unmishan nimishan api indriyan indriyarteshu vartanta iti dariyan. Just do one. Naiva kinchit karomiti manyeta tattvavit pashyan shrinvan sprishan jigran ashnan gachan swapan shvasan. Anyone else? You want to do it? Do the second one. Palapan visrajan grinnan unmishan nimishan api indriyan indriyarteshu vartanta iti dariyan. Okay, page 237. Sureshwar. I'll read the synonyms. Na, never, eva, certainly, kinchit, anything, karomi, I do, iti, thus. Yuktaha, engaged in the divine consciousness. Manyeta, thinks. Tattvavit, one who knows the truth. Pashyan, seeing. Shrinvan, hearing. Sprishan, touching. Jigran, smelling. Ashnan, eating. Gachan, going. Swapan, dreaming. Shvasan, breathing. Pralapan, talking. Visrajan, giving up. Grinnan, accepting. Unmishan, opening. Nimishan, closing. Api, in spite of. Indriyani, the senses. Indriya arteshu, in sense gratification. Vartante, let them be so engaged. Iti, thus. Dariyan, considering. Translation. A person in the divine consciousness, although engaged in seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving about, sleeping, and breathing, always knows within himself that he actually does nothing at all. Because while speaking, evacuating, receiving, or opening or closing his eyes, he always knows that only the material senses are engaged with their objects, and that he is aloof from them. Purport. A person in Krishna consciousness is pure in his existence, and consequently he has nothing to do with any work which depends upon 5 immediate and remote causes: the doer, the work, the situation, the endeavor, and the fortune. This is because he is engaged in the loving transcendental service of Krishna. Although he appears to be acting with his body and senses, he is always conscious of his actual position, which is spiritual engagement. In material consciousness, the senses are engaged in sense gratification. But in Krishna consciousness, the senses are engaged in the satisfaction of Krishna's senses. Therefore, the Krishna conscious person is always free, even though he appears to be engaged in affairs of the senses. Activities such as seeing and hearing are actions of the senses meant for receiving knowledge, whereas moving, speaking, evacuating, etc. are actions of the senses meant for work. A Krishna-conscious person is never affected by the actions of the senses. He cannot perform any act except in the service of the Lord, because he knows that he is the eternal servitor of the Lord. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara, the disciplic succession. So you may recall in the last chapter we had a verse encouraging us to see action and inaction and inaction and action. You remember that famous kind of confusing locution? Action and inaction and inaction and action. What does that mean? So, action and inaction. Action here means fruit of activity. Karma in the sense of good or bad work that's going to get a good or bad result. Something you're invested in. So, someone may be a yogi, but he's not a bhakti yogi. He's sitting and meditating, trying to control the senses, control the air, and so in that regard, he's sitting alone, just breathing, and basically, to the outsider, well, he's not doing anything. He's just sitting there, But actually, inside, he's working very hard to control the mind and to control the senses so they don't take the mind away. So he's active. That's action. And the motive is that he'll attain some siddhi or attain some position in the heavenly planets or something like that. Although it's a different kind of fruit of activity, it's still fruit of activity. It may not be gross fruit of activity, but it's still entangling. And so therefore, although it seems like he's not acting, he is acting. So that's action in inaction. It's still action, it's still karma. Whereas the devotee, as described here, all the knowledge acquiring and the active senses. This is something you learn in ISKCON. The analysis of this is Sankhya. The 5 knowledge acquiring senses, which is what we commonly call the senses in the Western world. The eyes, the ears, the nose, the touch, the taste. That's the 5 knowledge acquiring senses. But then you have the active senses. Certainly the hands, you do so much with them. They're called senses. And the voice, the legs, the feet, you're going places, and the evacuative organs and the reproductive organs. That's the other 2. So there's 5 knowledge acquiring and 5 active senses. Now, this is what we have to work with. If we're going to do something, we're going to work with those and the mind and intelligence. That's what we work with. So what kind of work we do is going to determine our destiny. What our motive is and what we actually do in our engagements with the outside world. So how is the devotee who's also active externally, he's doing so many things, different from a materialist who's also using those 10 senses? So the whole difference is in the consciousness of what you do with it. What is the motive? When a devotee is, like this garden here, has been cultivated, it's been established, if you will, by Bhadranath Swami. He was a gardener in New Vrindavan, and he worked with flowers, and he's got a taste for that. Every Sunday you come here, and he'll be out there picking and making beautiful arrangements, and then when the curtains open, you see how the deities are so nicely decorated. So he's a gardener, and he's got his aide there. What is it? Mani Bandhani, very experienced gardener. So there's so much work involved. Purchasing those big pots, that when they first appeared, now he's got some more smaller ones, because everything is paved. Well, you got to have some earth, so this is how you do it. So there's expense involved, care involved. Obviously gardening is a whole thing, but that's inaction. There's no karmic result. He's doing it for the sake of the beauty of the deity, the beautiful service of the deity. Whether you're digging something up or watering or buying the seeds, and there's so many things going on. So that's inaction. That's called naishkarmya. Naishkarmya means that the activity you're doing does not bring any result, good or bad. You're not binding yourself to this material world. Whereas the ordinary person may sometimes be doing nothing, but he's working out some plan, to build this or that, or some criminal is figuring out the, plot or whatever it may be. So externally it may look like he's doing nothing, but he's still very active, and that action will produce a result. Will produce some binding here to this material world. So that's what's described here. One who's in divine consciousness, just as we saw, Srila Prabhupada gave a perfect example. So many things he did. He was always working. He got up at midnight and he would write his books. He would dictate the books. And then there had to be the transcribers and all these, the things. But in this way, he was able to write so many books. If you write them the ordinary way, write them down, then you revise them, then give it to the editor, and then get back, check out what the editor did. We would have 5 books instead of 50 books of Srila Prabhupada. But he's active doing that, and the morning comes, and he gives the class, he goes on the morning walk, he meets this person, that person. Sometimes news reporters would come visit him, or scientists, or people, and always traveling all over the world, established, always active. But exactly in this, he's knowing that he's aloof from them, he's doing nothing at all, in the sense that he's not doing anything fruitive. And so therefore his, passage to the spiritual world is completely clear. There's no attachment here for anything material. So that's the kind of a mentality we should try to cultivate. The devotee, Prabhupada set it up so that if you want to do it full time, as Bhakta Saul can testify, from the morning, as soon as you get up, there's something to do, right? The whole morning of ablutions, getting ready for Mangalarti, put the tilak on, put the dress on, come down, Bhakta Saul, can you take the lamp around, like that. So he learned all these things. So there's plenty to do, but Bhakta Saul is not, he's burning off karma. He's not making any new karma, because it's not fruitive. There's no salary. The salary is we get a salary. It's the most valuable thing. It's increasing attachment to Krishna. It's all coming. It's blessing of Krishna. That's why offenses are so dangerous. To offend devotees, because you're trying to cultivate attraction for Krishna and the holy name and all these different things. But that's all Krishna's blessing. Whatever you're feeling in Krishna consciousness, in terms of 2 things. One is attraction for Krishna, one is more and more distaste for Maya. They go hand in hand. That's all coming from the heart. That's in your consciousness. And Krishna is giving you that. He's giving you that attraction for himself, seeing your sincerity. And he's telling Maya, let him go. Don't bother him with this. And so you find yourself less and less bothered by material attractions and thoughts. So it's nothing external. You can be a simple pauper. One of Lord Chaitanya's greatest devotees, what is his name? I'm talking, the one who Lord Chaitanya drank his water from his pot, the iron pot. I forget his name now. My brain is going. What is it? Kolavecha Sridhar, thank you. Kolavecha Sridhar. He was a great devotee of Lord Chaitanya, but he was very poor. He would make a little money making banana leaf plates, Anyone can get a banana leaf and make his own plate. The market wasn't that great. But he was getting a little money, and half of it he was spending to worship the Ganges. And somehow the other half he was maintaining, his household like that. So Lord Chaitanya would come, because he was a great devotee of Krishna and Lord Chaitanya. He's always thinking and meditating and chanting, And so Lord Chaitanya would come and tease him. He says, why are these leaf plates so expensive? Give me a donation. And so, so of course he would give, And then one time Lord Chaitanya forced, he had this old pot, this leaky iron pot that he was keeping his water in. And Lord Chaitanya went and drank the water from there, because it was his water, blessing him in that way. So he was living on practically nothing. Whatever he was doing, he wasn't doing it for material reasons. He was chanting, he was working to somehow keep body and soul together and like that. So many of Krishna's as well as Lord Chaitanya's devotees were very, very poor. Some voluntarily so. The 6 Goswamis, 3 of them. Raghunath Das would be like something like 100 millionaire or billionaire today. The way his uncle was named Hiranya Majumdar. Hiranya means gold. Maybe it was a nickname. I don't know. But they were very, very wealthy. He was the only son. But when he got, he met Lord Chaitanya, and then he met Nityananda and asked Nityananda to bless him so that he could break out of the material life that his parents had planned for him, And so Nityananda put his feet on his head and said, "You will very soon be free of that." And he ran away from home, and he went to Puri from Bengal, and he joined Lord Chaitanya in Puri. And he showed, although he had come from such a wealthy family, he showed the extreme limit of renunciation. Just begging for food. You can do that. You can stand by the steps of the temple there and get some beg from the Brahmins who are leaving with their packages. In this way you can sustain yourself. But he was thinking, no, this is like a prostitute. I'm thinking, oh, he gave me yesterday, so I'm going to go for him. Forget it. So what did he end up eating? He ended up rejected, because they make so much prasadam, some of it is not taken. So there's a rejected rice that even the cows won't eat it because it's going bad. He would take that, wash it thoroughly, and that would be his food. So Lord Chaitanya came to visit him, to bless him, and said, "I heard you're eating this wonderful prasadam. Where is it?" So he was silent. So this is not fit for Lord Chaitanya, But he dug around, he got it, and said, "Oh, this is the greatest prasadam." Blessing him. And then for years he was there with Lord Chaitanya for 12, 15 years. He wrote these notes and kept notes, a lot of it which formed the basis of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Anjalila. And then he was so struck, with separation when Lord Chaitanya left. He decided to go to Vrindavan and jump off Govardhan Hill and commit suicide. But when he got there, Rupa and Sanat and the other Goswamis greeted him and said, no, you have to tell us about Lord Chaitanya's final pastimes. We want to hear about them, because they weren't able to witness them. So Raghunath Das agreed, and then for hours every day he would stay by Radhakund and he would tell those pastimes. So these Goswamis, they showed the limit of renunciation, but they were very active. They were writing books, which today, we're reading this Bhagavad Gita, but we should know that the commentary, which is the basis of Prabhupada's purports, is most of it by Baladev Vidyabhushan, who was a student of Vishwanath Chakravarti, who was a follower of the Goswami. So it's all coming down from Lord Chaitanya's teachings, So that's the idea, is that Krishna consciousness is not inactivity. It's not trying to sit under a tree and meditate on Krishna. That's a type of bhajananandi. That's also, you go to Vrindavan and you just chant all the time, But the urgency of spreading Krishna consciousness is so great. If we truly want to be followers of Lord Chaitanya and get his blessings, then we have to do both. We have to have our own bhajan, as we have the morning program and chanting, and hearing Bhagavatam and all that. But then to use our day as much as possible, for giving Krishna consciousness to others. And that really completes the course, and you get the full mercy of Lord Chaitanya. So that's what's being described here, is that we really know we're not acting for ourselves. We're using the body like an agency, like a car, a machine, to use it in Krishna's service. And when it's no longer usable, give it up and go back to God. Any questions on this verse? Okay. Text 10. Brahmanyadaya karmani sangam tyaktva karoti yaha lipyate nasapapena padmapatram ivambasa. One who performs his duty without attachment, surrendering the results unto the Supreme Lord, is unaffected by sinful action, as the lotus leaf is untouched by water. Sinful action, okay. Purport. Here, Brahmani means in Krishna consciousness. The material world is a sum total manifestation of the three modes of material nature, technically called the Pradhan. The Vedic hymns, Sarvam Yetad Brahma, Mandukya Upanishad, Tasmadetad Brahma Nama Rupamannam Chajayante, Mundaka Upanishad 119, and in the Bhagavad Gita 14.3, Mama Yoni Mahat Brahma, indicate that everything in the material world is a manifestation of Brahman. And although the effects are differently manifested, they are non-different from the cause. In the Ishopanishad, it is said that everything is related to the Supreme Brahman or Krishna, and thus everything belongs to him only. One who knows perfectly well that everything belongs to Krishna, that he is the proprietor of everything, and that therefore everything is to be engaged in the service of the Lord, naturally has nothing to do with the results of his activities, whether virtuous or sinful. Even one's material body, being a gift of the Lord for carrying out a particular type of action, can be engaged in Krishna consciousness. It is then beyond contamination by sinful reactions. Exactly as the lotus leaf, though remaining in the water, is not wet. The Lord also says in the Gita 3:30, Mai sarvani karmani sannyasya. Resign all works unto me, Krishna. The conclusion is that a person without Krishna consciousness acts according to the concept of the material body and senses, but a person in Krishna consciousness acts according to the knowledge that the body is the property of Krishna and should therefore be engaged in the service of Krishna. So this idea is expressed in one of the seminal verses of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Near the beginning, Rupa Goswami has two verses that he defines what is pure devotee, what is pure devotion. The most famous is this Anyabhilashita Shunyam Jnana Karma Jnanavratam Anukulyena Krishna Anushilanam Bhaktir Uttama. Uttama Bhakti, or pure devotion, is defined as follows. Completely devoid of any other desire. Anyabhilashita Shunyam Jnana Karma Jnanavratam. Not covered or obscured, adulterated, by tinge of jnana, which means desire for liberation, or karma, desire for material sense gratification. And adi, and any other combination of these you come up with. Anavritam, not covered or obscured by that, or adulterated. Just like you find in the third canto, there is devotional service that's tinged with the mode of passion. Is that you're serving Krishna, but you want something. You know, you're praying for some material emolument, even to relieve my disease, whatever like that. So uncovered, and so that's what it isn't. Now, what is it? Anukulyena Krishna Anushilanam, activity or behavior that's intentionally engaged in favorable service for Krishna's pleasure. Anukulyena Krishna Anushilanam Bhaktir Uttama. This is pure devotion. So this other, companion verse is this one, and the reason I mention it because he uses the word Rishikesh in there, and that's what Prabhupada is describing here. Rishika Isha means the Lord of the senses. And Krishna is the Lord of even our very senses, and one who understands that tries to use the senses for Krishna. So he says, Sarvopadi vinimuktam tatpadatvena nirmalam rishikena rishikesha sevanam bhaktir uchyate. So here he says, Haribol Michael, welcome. Sarva Upadi. This is a very important concept of designations, impositions or designations we put on the soul in our sense of self. The ordinary person, we don't consider ourselves souls or jivas. We consider ourselves the body. Who am I? I'm a 45-year-old white American male. My name is such and such. My dress is such and such. And a whole bunch of other designations, right? I have this degree, or I have whatever, wife, children, So, but that's all in relation to the body. So that's that's called a temporary designation that we put on ourselves. But what is our real identity? It's pure soul. And Lord Chaitanya is defined, Jivera Swarupo. The idea of the Swarup, your actual form. Not your ever-changing bodily form, which is not really you. So the swarup of every jiva, every living entity, even the ones that are buried in bodies of plants and trees and insects, is to be an eternal servant of Krishna. Jivera swarupoi Krishnera nityadas. And the second line is also important. It says, Haribol Raj, welcome. What does he say? Krishnera tatasta shakti beda beda prakash. So the first line is the most famous. Jivera swarupoi. The swarup, the actual form or identity of every living entity, is to be an eternal servant of Krishna. Now there's an unlimited variety of services that you can perform in different moods or different rasas. So it's not hackneyed, but that's our... But then he says something about Krishnera tatasta shakti. So we're a shakti, we're energy. We're not actually Purusha, although we may act like that, the enjoyer. But we're energy. Krishna is energy. And what is the definition or the designation? Krishna tatastha shakti. Tatastha means situated on the margin. Margin between what? Between the material and the spiritual. And because we're marginal, we have a tendency to turn our attention toward the material side. And that's when we come into the material world. Those who are nitya mukta, they never make that mistake. That's a big mistake. We made that mistake. So we're trying to undo it now. So that marginal position, some of us, or a minority, but many, have made that choice, and we're now in the material energy. But we can turn our attention again to Krishna with the proper guidance, and again become under the influence of the internal energy. So this verse says, Sarvapati Vidimuktam, liberated, free from all those false designations. Just identifying ourselves as a servant of Krishna. We're all wearing different bodies, just like different clothes, but that's not who we really are. We all share the identity of being servants of Krishna with variety, certainly. So, Sarvapati Vidimuktam, Tatpavatena Nirmalam. Nirmalam means purified. And then, what do? Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam. Perform service with our senses to the master of the senses, Rishikesh. Now this word comes up, and when you read the Bhagavad Gita, in the, where do we find it? I think in the 2nd chapter, you'll find that this word Rishikesh is used again by Arjuna, and also by Vyasadeva, Krishna is the master of our senses. And Arjuna, the problem is he doesn't want to use his senses to serve the master of the senses. He's put into Maya by Krishna's will, so that the Gita could be spoken. But he's identifying himself with the body, so that he says, oh, these are my relatives, these are my friends, these are my cousin brothers, I can't kill them. So Krishna's first instruction as his guru, because he also gives him instruction as his chariot driver. He says, how have these impurities come upon you? Get up and fight. This is not Aryan. In other words, this is like the function, any charioteer would say this. No, you can't leave the battlefield. You have to, But then when he accepted him as his guru, he said, you're speaking learned words, but you're lamenting for what is not lamentable, the physical body. And so, then the whole lesson on the soul, 20 verses describing the difference between the body and the soul, and the characteristics of the soul and the spirit. Basic language. So this is exactly one who performs his duty without attachment. That surrendering the results to the Supreme Lord is unaffected by sinful. I think this should be reaction. Lipyate. Anyway, we'll work on that. But he gives all the surrendering results to the Supreme Lord. So this is acting in his Swarup. If we're actually eternal servants of Krishna, it means that we should find out what does Krishna want and try to fulfill that desire. That's a servant, a real servant. And we don't have to rack our brains. We come in touch with the realized soul, read the Bhagavad Gita as it is, and we can understand. Krishna wants us to hear about him, Shabdanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, remember, serve, do all these things that Srila Prabhupada taught us. There's a whole program. And then the immediate result, we won't be entangled. We'll feel ourselves becoming disentangled from the material energy, rather than further and further entangled. And that leads to liberation and going back home, back to Godhead. All right, any questions on this particular verse?
I have a question.
Wow, morning and evening classes. Do you sleep at all?
Not much.
Okay, go ahead, Vijay Krishna Prabhu.
Yes, Dravida Prabhu, Dandavat Pranams. In accordance with this verse, for us to stop being sinners, we need to we need to surrender the results of our duties to Krishna. So based on this, let's imagine that although I am working and getting an income, still the income is very little, so I am extremely poor, and I have nothing to offer to Krishna. So based on this, my question is it that not being able to offer the results of my work to Krishna because my income is very little, is it that it makes me, such a situation makes me a sinner?
No. You find that, as I was mentioning, like the Goswamis, I mean, from the external, they're as poor as you could possibly be. You know, it's not. They didn't even claim a spot under a tree as theirs. That they, every night they lived under a different tree, so they have as little as you could possibly have. But so what were they doing? In other words, you can't say, well, because everything they did do, and they did so much wonderful work, writing books and chanting so many rounds. What did Haridas Thakur offer? He didn't have anything material to offer, but he taught the holy name. He was glorifying the holy name and inspiring people to chant. He was designated the Namacharya by Lord Chaitanya. So the idea is that wherever we happen to be, this is he's speaking here in terms of society in general. If one performs his duty without attachment, surrendering results unto the Supreme Lord. So the formula is, as Srila Prabhupada told us early on, is not that if you go and make money, you have a family, you give it all to Krishna and give it all to the temple, and your children starve to death. No, it's half. You're supposed to give half. That's a serious commitment. In the Christian, it's a tenth, right? It's a tithing. I don't know how often you give the tithe, once a month. But that's a serious commitment. But even more serious is give half of your earnings. So the idea is to recognize, first of all, internally that it's all belonging to Krishna, and the principle of prasadam, of offering prasadam. So you work, you can buy the bhoga, and to your whatever is your level of income, you buy nice bhoga, and you prepare wonderful preparations for Krishna, and then it's not that he eats them all, I mean, he does eat them all, but he doesn't consume them, so they're not there anymore. And then you partake what's necessary, distribute the rest, and it becomes a sacrament. It becomes an exchange of love rather than just cooking and eating for yourself. So that the idea is that no matter how rich you are, you can embrace this principle of first recognizing that everything belongs to Krishna. We have a perfect example in Ambarish Das, who was a wonderful devotee of Lord Chaitanya, of Krishna, and of Srila Prabhupada, disciple. And very wealthy. He came into more money, I think, as time went on. He's a direct heir of Henry Ford, you can imagine. But he showed by his example, the first extraordinary act was him helping to buy the Fisher Mansion in Detroit. There's a whole story about that. He and also Lekha Shravanti, she was the heir of the union organizer in the Ford plants. Interesting. And she also helped to buy it. And Srila Prabhupada himself negotiated an incredibly cheap price for it, with the owner. It's a wonderful story. But still, it was like $100,000 or something back in the early 70s. It was a good piece of change, And then eventually, he came into a lot more money, and millions. He spent millions. We know about the TOVP. This is before the TOVP. This was in the early 80s, early to mid 80s. Prabhupada, he had two main samadhi tombs that were built, one in Vrindavan and one in Mayapur. The one in Mayapur is called the Pushpa Samadhi, meaning that what goes in the ground first, before they started any construction, are the flowers that was on his body when he was interred, that they were very sacred. So those are carefully preserved and taken, and they form the basis of that. It's an incredible building. It looks like the Vatican. The architect was Italian. It's true. He was a devotee. So he spent millions on that. And then, the TOVP. So the idea is that, he recognized, it all belongs to Krishna. So let me use it for Krishna's service. That's the basic principle. Whether I have 10 cents or $10 million, it all belongs to Krishna. So if it's the percentage. Krishna wants to know the percentage. If all you got is $10 and you use half of it to for worship the deity and the other half to survive, that's the same as if someone has $1 million and gives half of that. So that's the principle. The whole, if it's really done without attachment, surrendering is unaffected by sinful action or reaction, as the lotus leaf is untouched by water. So the whole thing is in it being honest and adhering to the principle and recognizing that it all belongs to Krishna. I remember we once had an article in BTG, and it was entitled "Everything Belongs to God." And I think it may have been done on this verse that Prabhupada refers to from the Ishopanishad. Is it in this purport or previous purport? Yeah, there it is. It said everything is related to Supreme Lord or Krishna, everything belongs to Him only. Ishabhashamidam sarvam nyatkinchad jigatyam jigatena chaktena bundidamagodakasisviddanam. It's a famous verse. So Ishabhasham, everything is controlled and owned by the Isha. Krishna is the Supreme Isha, Ishwar. Sarvam, yatkinchad jigatyam, whatever is in the universe. We're entitled to our portion for maintenance. But don't be greedy. The word gridha is in there, which means greedy. It's basically the same word. That one should live as simply as possible. Because don't forget, when you have more and more and you become more and more attached, that drags you down, that binds you to this material world for another birth. The less you can do without, the less you can be attached to, the easier it is to become attached to Krishna, to direct your attention to Krishna. And so that science of using those very things you're attached to and giving them to Krishna, that's part of the principle. Whatever you have, you buy something new, this is described, I think, in one Nectar Devotion, offer it to Krishna first, then you can use it as remnants. Then the idea is that. Is that okay, Vijay?
Oh, Prabhu, as usual, better than okay. Outstanding answer to my question. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
I don't know what I'm going to do. He says, do I have a second opinion? It's one of these days.
You're just amazing, Prabhu. Thank you very
Michael,
much.
you have something?
So, you're talking about, if you have a lot of attachments.
Yeah.
Like the quantity of things you have. But isn't it also true that somebody could have very few possessions and be more attached to those than somebody that has a multitude of possessions that really isn't attached?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not the number of things.
It's not the number of things. It's the attachment to the things.
Yeah. On the material level, usually if you've got a lot of things to be attached to, you work really hard to get them, and that itself makes you attached. I worked really hard for that, so it kind of forms an attachment if you're meditating on it. But it may just come into your lap. You didn't work hard, so that you don't have that, and immediately you say, let me use so much of it for. I was living simply before. I can live, a little better now, but I don't have. I can use so much of it for Krishna.
And also, of course, if you have all these attachments, then you become. Let's say, you're chanting 16 rounds day after day after day, and then you lose the attachment, and then you see that all these things that you were attached to can now be used in the service of Krishna, right?
Yes, exactly.
And that's okay also.
Yeah, that's the perfection.
That's okay.
All right, one more, at least. Text 11. Kayena manasa buddhya kevalayar indriyarapi yoginak karma kurvanti sangam tyaktvatma shuddhaye. The yogis, abandoning attachment, act with body, mind, intelligence, and even with the senses only for the purpose of purification. Purport. When one acts in Krishna consciousness for the satisfaction of the senses of Krishna, any action, whether of the body, mind, intelligence, or even the senses, is purified of material contamination. There are no material reactions resulting from the activities of a Krishna-conscious person. Therefore, purified activities, which are generally called sadachar, can be easily performed by acting in Krishna consciousness. Sri Rupa Goswami in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 187 describes this as follows. Iha yasya hare dasye karma nama nasagira nigalashapyavastasu jivan mukta sauchite. A person acting in Krishna consciousness, or in other words, in the service of Krishna with his body, mind, intelligence, and words, is a liberated person even within the material world, although he may be engaged in many so-called material activities. Close quote. He has no false ego, for he does not believe that he is this material body or that he possesses the body. He knows that he is not this body, and that this body does not belong to him. He himself belongs to Krishna, and the body too belongs to Krishna. When he applies everything produced of the body, mind, intelligence, words, life, wealth, etc., whatever he may have within his possession, to Krishna's service, he is at once dovetailed with Krishna. He is one with Krishna and is devoid of the false ego that leads one to believe that he is the body, etc. This is the perfect stage of Krishna consciousness. So one thing, this is another famous verse Prabhupada would always quote. And we should always remember, Hare Krishna, you can sit there. We should always remember that what's the advantage of this? Of course, there's one main advantage. You say if you die and you're free of all attachments, then you don't come back again. You know, if you're not attached, you go back to Godhead. But even before that happens, there's tremendous pleasure in serving Krishna, in just being Krishna conscious. And this is a gift of Krishna. This is the gift of God. Just like I like to cite these verses in the second chapter, first canto of Bhagavatam. For one who's sincerely hearing about Krishna, Shunbatam Sukata Krishna Punya Shavana Kirtana Riddandaksto Yabadrani Vidunodi Suratsatam. So Krishna is within our heart. Don't forget that Krishna is always with us. And when he understands, oh, this person is sincerely hearing about me, then he starts cleansing away the abhadras, the inauspicious things in the heart. Attachments, anger, grievances, grudges, doubts, all kinds of things which are contaminated heart. And they become purified. And that means, in a few verses later, they say that, and if you keep doing this, evam prasanna manaso, you come to a state of natural joy, just being Krishna conscious. Just like for devotees, you know, chanting, and we see the deities beautifully dressed. Well, we had that festival with the flower petals. You know, that's always very ecstatic. Many of you were here. So what sense gratification is there for us in that? Really none. But there's so much pleasure in it because the deities are being so nicely glorified, and the devotees are all blissful, and everyone is enjoying this festival. You know, a bunch of flower petals. I mean, it's kind of expensive to buy those flowers and tear them up, you know. But whoever contributed that's all part of the joy. Oh, I gave up those $25 and they bought so many flowers. Now I see Krishna's enjoying the petals. So you're taking pleasure in Krishna's pleasure. That's the definition of bhakti. There's this one verse. Padma Purusha, I forget it. But Jani, Swasukatvam. Taking pleasure in the pleasure of the Supreme Person. And this is not an alien idea. Because if someone loves someone, a mother for a child, this is the purest love, selfless love that we find in the material world. Mother doesn't want anything else from this little baby, 6 weeks old or something. Just if the baby is comfortable and happy and warm and well fed and gives me a half a smile with the toothless smile, my day is made, right? There's no bargaining there. So that's selfless. So if you can serve Krishna and do something sincere, chanting and this, and you can see Krishna is happy, you feel that, I contributed to Krishna's pleasure, that's enough. And you can see how that's not dependent on any money or any selfish thing. That's a great blessing to be able to be in a state of mind where you can serve God and feel pleasure in serving Him. And He gives you that from inside. So here, this is how you are free from entanglement. That's the first, he's describing this. Because a lot of what we're talking about is it's all about karma and transcendental knowledge. It's also about jagya and, how to remain free, and so that we don't have to come back again in birth and death. But bhakti is much more than that. It's more than just a way to get free from birth and death. That's an important foundational principle to want to act in that way. But along the way, you started feeling the bliss of Krishna consciousness that we read about all the time. And that completely eclipses your desire for liberation, to the point where it's nadanam nadanam nasundari. Not only don't I want wealth and women and followers, but I don't even want liberation. What I do want and pray very ardently for is to have an opportunity to serve you, my Lord, uninterruptedly and without any material motive. That is the real platform of all the bliss that we read about, and that's most important. So that's what Krishna is telling us here, and we'll continue tomorrow, starting in text 12. But I've left a little time. I'd like to share a little poem. This is a meditation on Krishna entering the forest of Vrindavan, and in the end there's a benediction. Prabhupada gives us a definition of what this pastime can do for us. So this is from it's based on 2 verses from the 21st chapter, 10th canto of the Bhagavad Gita. So the verses go like this: Kusamata vanadadishishmi bringa vijakulugashta saraksarin mahidram Madhupata Vagaya Chari Ganga Sahapasupada Balashtaku Javedum Barhapiram Natavasam Vapu Karnayo Karnikaram Bimrun Masak Kanaka Kapisham by Jayanting Chamalam Randran Veno Hadadasudiha Purihan Gopa Vrindaranyam Sopatanamanam Prabhishad Gita Kirti. Can you explain? No. All right. So let me give you my little poetic translation. This you can understand, so listen carefully. Vrindavan's rivers, lakes, and hills ring out with charming hums and trills as flocks of birds and maddened bees rejoice among the flowering trees. To those idyllic woods and glens repairs Govinda with his friends Sri Rama and the cowherd boys to taste the most exquisite joys. And as they walk along the way, absorbed in herding and in play, Sri Krishna, beauty absolute, begins to blow his mystic flute. With peacock plume upon his head and fragrant flower on each ear, he enters Braj's wood with tread sublime, a dancer without peer. His golden yellow raiment glows, his garland reaches to his knees, and from his lips the nectar flows and fills his flute with melodies. As Krishna thus begins his day with friends who sing his glory sweet, he beautifies the forest way with fine impressions of his feet. Now, samadhi culminates in this: to always see this scene of bliss within oneself and outside too. May Krishna give this boon to you. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol. He plays, he sings, he dances, sometimes he wrestles with the boys, but on his way out, he's playing the flute, it describes. You can read the 10th chapter, chapter 21, or the Krishna book. Okay.